Hi everyone, this is David Bauders with TradeHounds and SPARXiQ, and I'm here today with Tony Buonocore. Tony is the president of United Electric. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so here we are at NAED National. Can you tell us a little bit about what are you trying to accomplish here at NAED National, and what do you hope to learn?
So NAED is just a fantastic organization. It's something that we really enjoy participating in. We found a lot of great partners over the years through NAED, SPARXiQ included. It's just a really great way to network and meet other people within the industry, and also get to learn about services that are available to us.
And as you come here, are you meeting with customers, suppliers? How does that work?
So we mostly meet with our vendors, and we generally have very specific items that we want to go over with each vendor. But then in between, we meet with other suppliers that aren't necessarily manufacturers, that offer services that we could participally use within our business. So it's been really good to that effect. And then occasionally we get to meet with other distributors too, which is very nice to hear their perspective as well.
Great. And I know there's a lot of change coming in the electrical industry. There's unprecedented innovation, new product launches, new regulations, new investments, new infrastructure bills. What are you guys thinking about with all the change going on in the industry?
So there's a lot of stuff going on, as you mentioned. I guess two of the larger trends that we're keeping a very close eye on. One is electrification, and we want to make sure that we are well positioned to do well with that. And then two, there's a lot of demographic changes that are coming along our way, not specific necessarily to our industry, but certainly for our country. And we want to make sure that we as a company are doing what we need to do internally to make sure that we're in a good position to handle that, but also to create value services to help our customers go through it as well.
So as you talked a little bit about some of the changes in the industry, one of the big ones that's standing out right now is demographic change. We know over the next 5 to 10 years, about half of electricians will be retiring, their knees and backs kind of saying no more. How is that change in customers starting to impact your industry and United specifically?
So this is true for us as well, but retirements is a major challenge that we're all facing at the moment. And there is a major drop off in knowledge. There's all this knowledge that is now kind of exiting the industry. And we are engaging in tools to help ourselves with that, but also help our customers. An example that I can give you of something that we're developing for our customers is we have a software that is kind of a combination of augmented and virtual reality that will allow our customers to have a team of field service folks centralize their most experienced people and then be able to scale out that knowledge to less experienced people in the field.
So basically documenting what they know, show how they do their work.
Yeah, it can be like centralized coaching so that they can see exactly what the person in the field is seeing and actually put visual cues in front of the person so to guide them through repair. We can mark up equipment with QR codes that gives them all the part list, manuals. You can actually have videos on that for common repairs. So there's a lot of stuff that we're working on there. Internally, we are starting to experiment quite a bit with artificial intelligence. One, to make our folks more efficient, to kind of help when labor will inevitably become harder to come by, but also from a knowledge transfer standpoint. The applications that we've been using so far has started to learn from our more experienced people that are using that software. So we are optimistic that we'll be able to leverage that and help newer, less experienced people in the future.
So with the new generation of customers coming in, obviously they have very different buying expectations. They are generally Gen Zers. They are born with cell phones in their hands. They expect everything to be digital, everything to be automated. They don't want to call their parents, let alone their supply houses. How are you leaning into this new digital generation and making sure that you guys win an unfair share of the customer?
So I think I should start by saying that our traditional method of leaning on relationships is still there, including for our younger customers. We now have younger salespeople, and they also seem to default to wanting to communicate digitally than in person. So pushing them to stretch themselves a little bit more to have some more human interaction is is the first challenge, and forming a one-on-one human relationship with the folks in the field, I think, is incredibly important. That said, as you mentioned, the younger generation seems to be much more open to digital. They want speed and accuracy and don't always have the patience to pick up the phone and wait for a human being to give them an answer. We have invested heavily in our website to try to help accommodate that. We just launched a new website at the end of last year. I don't think we've seen the full evolution of that. I think the next evolution, at least for United, we'll likely start developing microsites that will be maybe customer specific, but maybe even user specific at some point in the future. In terms of engagement, our marketing team has been spending a lot more time working on social media, which is an area that we haven't really focused on too heavily other than like the last few years.
Yeah, I think one of the things we're seeing with at Trade Hounds, we have about half of our users are in MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. And basically what the new generation is saying is they want to be connected to the people that they buy from. And really that social precedes commerce in a lot of ways. And how are you engaging people? How are you engaging your sales teams to take advantage of that trend?
So I think from, like you had mentioned engagement, I think in terms of awareness of the different things that United is doing as a company, whether it's services that we're offering or launching, engagement with the community, all those things, I think it's important that our customer base and the community itself know about that. And social media has proved to be a much more important platform for that. I do believe that a lot of the decision making that occurs, especially on a large project basis, is still reverting back to the needs of the customer, whether that be price or adding value in logistics, things of that nature. But the perception of us as a company, our culture, and even that internal piece, a lot of our employee owners also are learning about what we're doing as a company through social media as well. That is all still critically important.
And we know that most distributors have really struggled with their e-commerce journey. It's like sometimes call it the trail of tears for distributors. They invest, thousands, millions of dollars trying to get to the point where people will transact with them digitally online. And what we're seeing in the Trade Hounds community is really big dissatisfaction with the whole e-commerce experience with distributors. There's a few root causes of it. Some of them are within the distributor's control, like do they have their product data in a point where it's easy to discover the products you're looking for? But others of them are more, structural and fundamental and very difficult for distributors to solve. The basic question is, does an electrician really want to have 5 different logins to 5 different distributors? Do they want to have 5 passwords? Do they want to have 5 different navigation pathways through e-commerce sites? And they're saying pretty loud and clear that they don't want that. And while they may use distributor websites to look for product information in terms of transacting, it's just too hard. And fundamentally what we're seeing now with a lot of our Trade Hounds users is that they want a single navigation experience, single logon, and to be able to navigate with their various supply partners in a single platform. Can you talk about how marketplaces like Trade Hounds are going to play a role for you going forward?
So we haven't engaged heavily in marketplaces yet. We have had a lot of contractors come to us and request that we participate in various punch-out softwares where they're collecting our data and presenting it in this singular platform. I see pluses and minuses to that. I think on the front side, it's a really efficient and fast way for customers to get information from multiple sources and see it all laid out in front of them in a very easy to understand way. An area that I don't necessarily think that all electrical contractors have considered until it's happened is that when you do that route and you choose to buy different pieces or different components of a project from different sources, trying to project manage that when there are delays and issues, unforeseen issues that come up, can present a new set of challenges that necessarily a punch-out platform isn't going to answer in and of itself.
So they're introducing complexity.
Yeah, what happens is you are now having a multitude of different vendors supplying components to a singular project in a way that maybe they hadn't before, where instead of selling individual pieces, there were lots. right? And by selling a lot instead of components, that one distributor can project manage that entire project, which is a value that I'm not sure the electrical contractors knew they were receiving until some problems like that arise.
So they end up having too many conversations on the same project,
Yes.
basically. Different
I think
people, different.
It becomes price-led, which, you're cherry picking different pieces of the project across all these different vendors without thinking about how you're going to actually manage that.
Interesting. So we think about half of electrical spend is what we call unplanned spend. This is where people in the field realize they don't have the right products, they don't have enough of it, they have, changes they need to make based on the previous trade that screwed things up. How do you guys help people in that kind of urgent, need it right away in a digital way?
So we have a service that we launched a few years ago that we were actually trying to replace some of our counter locations with. It's a service called On Demand, which is guaranteed delivery within 2 hours. We actually have a fleet of electric cars that we purchased for it because we found that usually most of those purchases aren't pipe or wire. It's usually smaller items that can fit into a car. And from a digital perspective, we have made that a checkout option. So if someone is on our website or our app and they need something very quick, they can go on, they don't have to engage with the person, and they can select On Demand as a delivery, assuming that the shipping zip code is within our 2-hour reach.
Service radius.
And the product is something that qualifies, meaning it's not like cut wire.
Right.
So we spent quite a bit of time and resources to build that functionality out so that our website could handle exactly those situations where there's a sudden emergency.
And how has that worked for you from a competitive perspective? Are you seeing competitors matching that, or how would you describe that?
Not yet. I suspect eventually we will. I think just in some of the networking that I've done, I've heard a lot of folks saying that when they do an analysis of their counters and their some distributors still have showrooms, that when you take out the delivery and will call of those locations, that they found that they are usually unprofitable or pretty close to being unprofitable. So I think this delivery method is a better way, and I expect others will adopt it as well.
Can you talk a little bit about the importance of making sure you get paid fairly for the value you bring? What's your approach to pricing and strategic pricing? We've worked together, SPARXiQ and United, for a long time. It's obviously part of it's a process issue, part of it's analytics issue. How has pricing led to success at United Electric?
So we've had a lot of success, especially initially when we first started working with Sparks. Found that we hadn't, factored in, I think particularly on some like the CD items that typically people don't put too much attention on. We were being way too aggressive with our pricing on that.
Meaning too low.
Too low. Mm-hmm. And it's a balancing act because we do certainly want to be competitive, but there is a lot of value that distribution adds that we don't always get paid for, that have true costs to us. So anywhere we are able to try to, get fairly paid for that value, we try to. Certainly on a service level, I know a lot of distributors will often give those services away for free. We try to put a value to it just to, one, to get paid for it, but also from a perception standpoint, I think it's important that we don't devalue what we do, and it's important that we set the right message for that.
We've talked to, we own a purchasing platform at SPARXiQ as well, and we talk to the buyers, and they basically tell us in terms of how they choose their supplier. Number one, it's in-stock availability. Number two, it's geolocation. Product has to be close to the point of need. Number three, it has to be service quality and trust. And then number four is price. Obviously, on big projects, it leans more in favor of price, but as I mentioned earlier, about half of contractor spend is typically unplanned in nature. It's emergency with their hair on fire. Got to get it or work stops. I think a lot of distributors haven't really thought through the implications of all of that. They continue to assume that every single quote request is going to be a price-driven decision. And frankly, they're depriving themselves of the resources they need to have a fleet of electric vehicles that goes around and leans into how you help people who can't plan. And where would those monies come from if you're just getting, single digit margins on everything you sell? I think it's one of those areas where if distributors would just stop and think, they'd realize it's not sustainable. And particularly for an employee-owned company, you're just going to retire later with lesser resources when you can't solve this basic problem. So tell me a little bit about overrides at United Electric. This is kind of where salespeople go off the rails and try to take it over themselves.
So it is incredibly important that we measure and hold people accountable when it comes to overrides. I find that from a dynamic pricing perspective, it's not necessarily winning the minds of senior leadership. We typically see the value in it and understand the importance of it. It's more on the sales level of the inside sales team. Even our counter folks that are actually talking and engaging in with the customers feel a higher level of pressure, and that pressure isn't always real, right? So it is really important to hold people accountable that are overriding at too high of a rate, so that dynamic pricing can't do its job and do what it's meant to do.
It's really interesting because when we were acquiring this company, the material management purchasing platform for buyers, we interviewed the buyers, and I wanted to know. It was fun for me, having been in the pricing industry for all of these years, to look behind the curtain and start asking, well, how do you feel about competitive quoting? And what we heard almost to a person was, fundamentally, we hate doing competitive quotes. I said, well, that's the opposite of what all the salespeople have been telling us all these years. Explain to me why you don't like doing competitive quotes. And they said, first of all, you have to go out and ask 5 different distributors for their prices and for their product lines. They respond to you in different moments in time. They respond to you with different products. They're all partial responses generally. They have some of the products, but not all of them. And then you have to, and certain products, by the way, will be excluded. They can't meet these product needs. And then you have to go make sense of all of this and try to get into apples to apples form. And in order to do that comparison, you have to be able to cross-reference products from different distributors. You have to figure out what's an allowable substitution, what's not. And he said, realistically, we can't do this on everything that we buy. And yet salespeople persist in thinking that every single time a customer asks for a price, they're going through that activity that's practically impossible for them to do at scale. So I started thinking to myself, why is it that there's such a disconnect between what salespeople believe about their customers and what those same customers tell us themselves? And I think fundamentally what buyers have learned to do, 90% of buyers have been trained in professional negotiation tactics, less than 10% of sellers have. And they've learned that the easiest money in purchasing is saying, you've got to do better than that. Yeah. You're coming a little bit high. Yeah. They don't have to do their homework. They don't have to get to apples. If they just utter one or both of those 2 phrases, their prices come tumbling down. And frankly, I think it's just a matter of education. Our salespeople need to understand if something's needed in less than 48 hours and it's a small purchase, what are the chances they're actually competitively shopping that? It just doesn't make any sense. I think it's really this overgeneralization of what comes with big competitive job quotes. They think that's going on in everything. But if they just took a moment to maybe live in their customers' shoes, frankly, I think a lot of salespeople, if they spent more time in a buyer's office, they'd understand a lot better what's really going on there, and they'd stop doing this. But fundamentally, you can't win projects if you give it all away on everything, because your smarter competitors are always going to figure out, okay, I'm going to get deep on the A items, and I'm going to balance that with premiums on the C's and D's. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the whole importance of getting the best vendor costs that you can to support your projects?
I think it's critical. And you had mentioned that, a lot of the buyers on contractor side have been professionally trained. I think at least at United, we probably haven't done enough to help our team negotiate better rates with our vendors. Right? I believe in many cases we're too reliant on our in-stock price, or if there's a special price agreement set up for a customer, we think that is
end of the story.
End of story, right? When I think usually that there's more that can be fought for, and that's a cultural issue that we are just starting to try to figure out how we're going to address.
Yeah, I think one of the things, SPARXiQ has been starting to apply machine learning to understand vendor rebate approvals and basically to understand what are the likely approval levels for different types and sizes of customers and different types of projects. What we've seen is generally distributors are under capturing their supplier rebates by about 30%. And the reason for that is they've delegated the request process to field sales. Field sales, unless the margin goes below a certain threshold, they don't pick up the phone. Or like you say, they notice there's already an existing program. They don't ask, well, is that the best program for this situation? So they're basically having to win these big projects with shareholder dollars because they didn't get the right cost supports. So I think this is one of the areas where machine learning is going to finally start to connect suppliers and their distributors more effectively. Because frankly, it's in nobody's best interest for the distributor to underperform with their rebates. When they underperform, they don't win deals, they get lower share of wallet, they get cherry-picked, all that stuff. One of the other areas I wanted to talk about is how do you get insights beyond your own data to understand your share of wallet with your customers, your market share, where to go with pricing, for example. Looking beyond your own data, a lot of distributors have made that migration into big data, but haven't really thought through, well, what am I not seeing in my own data?
So we don't have a lot of external data sources. We do on an account level in terms of the number of employees, and based off the NAED code, like what that equates to on the estimated multiplier basis in terms of total spend or total spend potential, which will give us a sense of how much share we have in that account. Beyond that, we haven't really done too much. We are engaging with SPARXiQ account GPS, which kind of gives us a little bit of window if there's a certain area within a customer compared to a like customer of maybe a product type that we're not getting as much as we should. But that's all based off of internal data. It's not, we're not utilizing any external sources.
Market data sources. Yeah, one of the innovations at TradeHounds now is we're starting to aggregate from our platforms to be able to understand what is the true spend potential of contractors, how many quotes do they have outstanding, what is their spend profile look like, so that distributors can start to understand what % of the time are we even being included in the RFQ process, what's our conversion rate from stage to stage in the quoting cycle. Can you talk a little bit about the difficulty in managing quotes and making sure that your sales teams follow up after they've spent the time to create all these quotes?
Yeah, our quotations team is extremely busy. They receive more quotes than they can physically do. So we are at times saying no quote to some customers just because we don't have the bandwidth to handle all the quotations that are coming in. We are getting better at that as we are applying AI solutions, right? That is doing a lot of that data entry on our
Speeding
behalf.
it up, yeah.
My hope is that as we become more efficient in processing quotations, it'll free up our human associates to be able to spend more time and focus on trying to negotiate the better costs. Where complexities really start to come in is post-sale in the project management side. Managing all these projects that we have when we don't have great visibility into our manufacturers' production processes and
Supply chain issues.
Specifically when there is a delay of some sort. Often we don't know or find out about it until the ship date comes and it doesn't ship.
Gotcha.
Right? And then we're all scrambling.
It's too late.
Yeah. So that's an area that I've personally been also very focused in. NAED has launched a committee. It's called Where's My Stuff? That I'm lucky to be able to participate in. It is a committee that includes distributors, manufacturers, rep agencies, and even contractors. We're all kind of getting together trying to figure out a way that we can all sync up, hopefully digitally, so that we all kind of are on the same page as the supply chain issues come up.
So tariffs are in the news quite a bit these days. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of tariffs at United?
Yep. So the area that has been impacted the most by tariffs is our pricing department. Manufacturers have been trying to protect themselves as it seems the news changes almost daily, right? So
hourly.
Instead of having one high price increase, there's been many incremental price increases. And for our pricing team to stay on top of making sure all those costs are uploaded has just been an absolute nightmare. Outside of that, it hasn't actually been as bad as I thought. I had anticipated that a lot of the larger CapEx type projects were going to get postponed to some degree. I thought that a lot of the end users would want to wait and let things kind of cool down and see exactly where things stood before they ordered some of this material, especially the engineered to order material that has a very long lead times, because who knows what the situation is going to be like when the material actually lands. But it hasn't. We had a very strong April. We saw our backlog significantly increase, and a lot of that is project business. So people are still doing business. It's just become much more challenging on a pricing standpoint.
Working harder. Yeah.
And certainly we've been negotiating harder than ever on our terms and conditions on these projects.
Yeah, I think shortening the validity dates is super important, not having exposure there. And then also just the frequency and the velocity, if you will, of price increases, the extreme variability of the amounts of the increases. It's going to make strategic pricing much more important for distributors, because they got to figure out where can they and can't they capture those cost increases.
Yeah, I would agree.
Well, it's been great chatting with you, Tony, and really appreciate all the good work you've done at United, and look forward to continuing our relationship.
Yeah, David, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.